Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Haitian Times community conversation for the month of February. We will be starting very shortly. Just give us 1 minute, please. Thanks for joining. I see some of you already on. If you'd like to share with us where you're joining from, we would love to know who all is on and where everybody is joining us from today. You can just go ahead and drop that in the chat. I see Miami, Florida. I always love to see where everyone is coming from. This is great. Los Angeles. I think I know who that is there. Thank you for joining. And we'll get started in just 1 more minute. Kew Gardens, love it.
Ok, nous commencé dans à peu près 1 minute. Merci pour tout le monde qui commence là. Moi, ouais, plusieurs côtés déjà dans le pays. Moi, ouais, Miami, moi, ouais, Los Angeles. Et semble qu'on bel petit jardin tout en côté. En tout cas, nous avons commencé dans 1 minute. Et merci pour patience.
Just one quick technical point. Is it possible, Cheryl, before we start, to mute the interpreter for us so we're not hearing her at all or not? I just want to make sure so I know what to tell folks here.
Give me a moment and I'll be able to do that.
Okay, thank you. Apologies everyone who's just joining us. Thanks for being with us this evening. This is going to be a great conversation with Ambassador Daniel Foote and Gary Pierre, our publisher at the Haitian Times. Just give us a couple more minutes to get the technical piece sorted. We appreciate you. And yes, if you're joining, tell us where you're joining from. I see lots of people coming in from different places all across the US. This is wonderful. All right.
Bonsoir encore tout le monde. Merci pour participation nous. Moi, ouais, plusieurs monde dans plusieurs villes, dans plusieurs États, pays États-Unis. Merci pour participation nous. Nous avons fini avec un petit problème technique pour nous commencer. Et nous avons bien avec nous après-midi ambassadeur Daniel Foote et puis éditeur et directeur Haitian Times qui c'est Gary Pierre. Nous allons commencer dans un petit temps. Merci en pile pour participation aujourd'hui.
Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. The translation piece, I see someone asked about. Apologies, we're trying to figure it out. So for the time being, you might just hear the translator a couple times, or we might just mute her completely so that it doesn't hurt the experience for some of us on here, but bear with us. However, we are at time and we want to get started to make sure we respect everyone's time. So we're going to just go ahead. Again, thank you for joining us this evening. My name is McElvie Neal. I'm the Executive Director of the Haitian Times. And we really appreciate you all for joining us today for yet another Haitian Times community conversation. We started doing these last year and they've been really well received from people across the diaspora who are looking for just information about Haiti that's told from, our standpoint, from the standpoint of people who really understand the Haitian, what's going on with Haiti, the Haitian condition. So we really thank you for joining us. Today, February 7th, should be a date when we're inaugurating or watching the installation of a different government in Haiti every 5 years. That's what we should be doing today. Instead, we're again just watching to see what happens with warring groups in Haiti from different camps that are just all questioning each other's legitimacy, We have people across Haiti calling for the current prime minister to step down because his term would have ended with President Jovenel's term had he been alive to stay as the head of state for this long. We have people from the Montana Accords who are insisting that it's their time. It's time for a provisional government, and they'd like that date to be today. And people are watching to see what the gangs do, because in the absence of any real government, the gangs have really proliferated, and the insecurity crisis is beyond what anyone could have ever thought of. So here we are. Port-au-Prince has been really quiet from what we've heard today. People decided to stay home, not go to school. Businesses were closed for the most part in the city of Port-au-Prince. At the same time, we heard that Prime Minister Ali gave a speech that has drawn some criticism already as soon as he gave it. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And to get us started, we'll start there with Ambassador Daniel Foote and Gary Pierre, just to get their sense of what's going on in the day before we then delve into how Haiti has gotten to the point where it is right now from these different political factions, and get some ideas on what could be done moving forward. For all of you that are on this call today, people who are interested in Haiti and love Haiti and understand its potential, what can be done? So we'll go ahead and get started with their take on what they're just seeing unfold from the day. These two really need not much introduction, so I'll be very brief. Ambassador Daniel Foote, I'll start with you. He is an American diplomat and career member of the Senior Foreign Service. He formerly served as the ambassador of Zambia, and most recently, we know him from 2001, most of us here, for his role in the debacle that followed the assassination of Jovenel Moïse. He was selected to be the United States Special Envoy after the assassination, and about just a couple months later, he resigned with some very specific criticisms for the US government on the treatment of Haiti and Haitians. So we'll hear from him and just learn about his experience during those months in Haiti and what maybe we can learn from him. Gary Pierre, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, is the founder of the Haitian Times and a leading voice, of course, on Haiti, the Haitian diaspora, and community media. He is currently a Sulzberger Executive Leadership Fellow at Columbia University, exploring ways to see how what we do at the Haitian Times can be expanded worldwide as our own diaspora just seems to continue expanding. With that, I will go to Ambassador Foote just to get his take on what's happening during the day here, what he's seen so far, and then we'll go over to Gary for his thoughts.
Good evening, McAlvey, and thank you very much. Bonsoir to everybody. It's a pleasure and an honor for me to join you folks here today. And before I start, let me just say that you're going to hear a lot of opinions from me tonight, and that's what they are. So I'm not the truth teller or the soothsayer. As many of you know, I form my opinions through an awful lot of engagement with the diaspora and with Haitians in Haiti more than anything. So if I say something that you don't agree with, that's fine. Because when I went to Haiti, if I had asked the Haitians to do what I thought in July, this would be a bigger mess than it is right now, probably. So by listening, I've gotten to the point where we are. So today, February 7th, 2022, as you said, it was very quiet, although I understand in Village des Dieux and Martissant, there was plenty of gunfire and activity going on there. I did not hear or read the transcript from de facto Dr. Henry's speech to the nation. So I'm not going to go into details, but from what I was told, he did not mention the Penn-Montana Accord. He didn't mention really the people of Haiti and their voice and the work they had done to come together and form consensus. It almost seems like he just thinks that he's in charge and he's moving forward and damn the torpedoes. So I'll stop there right now.
Gary, let's go to you. What do you make of what's happened today and Henri's speech to the nation?
Well, I just think that we have a serious lack of leadership right now. This is a very serious moment, and I'm not sure that the Prime Minister, well, the ambassador was the de facto, but I would just, keep it Prime Minister, really lives up to the task. This is a solemn moment. This is a moment where, he could have shown leadership, addressed the nation in a very serious way, and unfortunately failed to do so. But am I surprised? Absolutely not. Most of Haiti's leaders, including Dr. Henri, have really little respect for the people of Haiti and their needs and desires and aspirations. And they are really drunk on power. The idea of having the job is more important than the job itself. And I think today's, him not being able to rise to the occasion, to the moment, says it all. And it also foreshadows what kind of situation that we'll see this year is going to be like for us.
Yeah, to echo that, that's kind of what we're hearing from the political analysts and academics who heard the speech. They're saying it sounds a lot like he's brushing aside the Montana Accords, and that he's pledging to move forward with elections again and pledging to get international assistance to move forward. But for all intents and purposes, the tone struck it more as a strongman speech, very arrogant in many ways, is what some people are hearing. Is what some people heard from his presentation, regardless of what he actually said. So that's where we are right now. But Ambassador Foote, let me go to you, because you met, obviously, Dr. Henri after the assassination, and you guys were at the funeral together. Tell us about those interactions with him and how he struck you then when you were in that role, and just compare that to what you're seeing today or what you've seen since resigning.
My initial reactions with Dr. Ariel Henry were, he's a smart guy. I mean, he's sharp. He speaks English, French, Creole perfectly, all three languages, although I can't really judge the Creole and the French part, but English he does. But I was kind of struck by his lack of charisma just from the get-go. Very, he's a quiet, deliberate kind of guy. And back then, this was in July, I went to Haiti. My goal on July 23rd, when I left, when I arrived in Cap Haitien for the funeral, was to find the path forward to the quickest way to have elections in Haiti. And I spoke to as many people as I could on that trip and ensuing trips. And everyone, except for maybe a couple, including Dr. Ariel Henry, told me you could not have acceptable elections right now in Haiti. Dr. Henry told me that in July. Nothing has changed. If anything has changed, it's only eroded more and gotten worse. Security certainly hasn't improved. And so what has changed that he thinks he can hold elections now, other than the fact that the internationals are putting pressure on him? And I also think he's starting to feel a little pressure on the law enforcement side as a gentleman, a person of interest in the assassination investigation.
Yeah, so let's get into that a little bit more. As most of you know, if you're on this call, Dr. Henri has been implicated in the, not formally, of course, but he has had contact with a lot of the suspects who've either been apprehended or who are fugitives of the law. There's some interactions he had in the morning of the assassination where he had several phone calls with some people who are still on the lam from the murder. And we know that he's been called to be interviewed by the magistrate, the the prosecuting judge, and he just decided not to participate. And the thing with Haiti is that there's no real mechanism to actually compel him to appear for an interview in a court of law. So that goes into the heart of the matter, Gary, that I'd like you to touch on. Just the lack of institutions, the lack of accountability, where it just seems like a free-for-all and everyone can just do whatever they want.
Let's go back to where you talk about. So he came in, I believe, on the 18th of July is when the core group issued that statement, sort of anointing him, changing from Claude Joseph to Ariel Henry with no explanation. I still would love to know what was behind that, but they did that. And since then, he's done nothing. And he still has the chutzpah to come out today and say, oh, he's starting now, he's going to go great guns, he's meeting with IMF. And you know what? If no movement's been made in 7 months, I don't think the Haitian people are going to trust that he's going to make movement in the ensuing months. What has troubled me more than anything are two things with Dr. Henry. One, he owes the people answers. He doesn't owe me answers, but he owes the Haitian people answers. What were these calls? What was he doing at the Montana at 4 o'clock in the morning? Was Badio at the Prime Minister's house in Bordeaux a couple times? That seems kind of odd. Where did Ariel go when he disappeared for 3 days after those early morning phone calls? Easy questions to answer. He's never answered those. And then I believe that he has impeded at best and obstructed or worse the investigation since he's been in there, and it's made no progress. So how can the Haitian people trust this guy moving forward, and how can they trust any elections that he's involved with? I told him in July, after listening to everybody and understanding that the only way that this might have a chance for the things to get better is a real political, socio-political reset in Haiti. And I remember telling him, look, you need to convince the people that you deserve to be part of the transition interim solution. If you don't have a place. And he's really put no effort into doing that. And as a result, the people don't trust him. And I think we can infer that if he comes in and they don't trust him and he holds elections, what's the outcome of the elections?
So, to go back, I mean, you said he struck you as a very smart person, right? So
he was. I'm not sure he still is, but he was.
Right. So what changed? Is it as simple as Gary's point of, people being in these roles and being drunk on power?
So here's my theory. Haitian politicians have never had a good role model, have never had a good example, ever. Maybe we could go back to the 1800s here, there, but very rarely have they had. So all they've seen is people installed by those with arms or power or international stuff, and then they use the army or the police to take away from the people. And so that's all anybody knows. That's what people think leadership is in Haiti. So everyone I've seen, they get near sniffing distance of the palace, and they start to go a little soft in the head. I really believe that. I've talked to several friends, old friends of Ariel Henry, that say he's just changed completely. And so part of it, I think, is there's no great example. None of them that I've seen, certainly Ariel Henry doesn't appear to have Haiti's people's best interests in mind. I don't know what he has in mind. And I honestly think that part of this is an effort to avoid justice, because as long as he's sitting in that palace in the premature, then he thinks, and probably many other people think, he's not touchable. Nobody can, FBI can't, are we going to indict him? I doubt it. If he's a head of state, I don't consider him a head of state. I don't think Haiti does, but we're going to have to see where this goes.
There are so many other follow-up questions I have for you, including socio-political reset you suggested that he try to lead, but let's save that for a little bit later. I want to bring Gary in to just add some context around that point you made of Haiti not having any good role models, right? For one, there are enough Haitians, including Ariel Henry, who were educated outside the US, who really know better. Like they've seen models that work or are working, right? So then what's behind just going into Haiti and having a sniff of that palace, as you say, and letting it go to their heads? Let's talk a little bit more about that, and then we'll move on, Gary.
Well, I mean, I think the ambassador has really elaborated on that point quite well. This is something that, you know, I've been writing about for quite some time. And you're right, McElvey, it's not for a lack of models, but there are certain things that, you know, all my friends and sources in Haiti will tell you, whenever they get to Haiti, whatever it is that they learned outside of Haiti, they tell you, this is Haiti. This is how they like to say it. And I underscore this, Haiti. You know, you don't understand it. Haiti, things are not done like that in Haiti. And then it's kind of the absurdity. And hence the frustration that we all have trying to figure out people you know very well. And some of them like T. Claude, your buddy, McElvey, you know, for all practical purpose, he's a Haitian American. He grew up in Brooklyn. His mother still lives in Brooklyn. And so he knows better. But when you come back to Haiti, they give you the Haiti deal. And it's not a good deal. And we just have to move on from that. And I think part of it is that the Haitian people have lost their appetite for democracy. I mean, they were so optimistic, all in on democracy, 1990, 1991. Then Aristide got overthrown twice. And then they got Michel Martelly. And now they don't believe in democracy. And so that's what's happening. And the leaders know that. So you have Jovenel Moïse getting elected with, well, where 600,000 people voted, and presumably not all of them voted for him. So he had less than, let's say, 400,000 people out of 6 million eligible voters. And that's not much of a mandate to do anything. And so hence the paralysis that we've been experiencing. But as far as role models, I think they know better.
Yeah, that certainly is true. Let's go into just the corruption, right, we see in government. Ambassador Foote, you were there, you got to meet, all of these people, really, all these key players after the assassination and before, right? And you said you had shared some thoughts with the US administration, with the Biden administration on how to move forward, but those pretty much fell on deaf ears. Can you take us back to that time maybe and tell us where, like we know you resigned right after the treatment of the Haitian immigrants coming in at the border, right? But up until that point, tell us more about what was happening in the halls of government that made you just think twice about the role you were in.
And it's much better now, 4.5 months after, because I've gone through the emotional trip as well, and I better understand myself what happened. The terrible images of the border and the deportation was just the final straw for me. What I started seeing probably late August when Montana got its original accord, I started seeing the embassy move away from that, like just that didn't want anything to do with Montana. And that's when I saw the international community put a lot of pressure on Ariel Henry to reach his power sharing agreement. I call it his September 11th Accord, which is not really a socio-political agreement. It's just a couple of political parties that said, you can be this, I'll get that, you get the port, I get the airport, etc. So when President Moïse was assassinated, Haiti sort of became a failed state at that moment, in my personal opinion. I mean, maybe it was a week later, maybe it was a month later, maybe it was a week before, I don't know, it doesn't matter. Because the government has been unable since then to provide security, to provide you know, a road that can get you to and from the airport without getting shot at, fuel, generators in hospitals so people who are on ventilators don't die, food, COVID shots, all of that. He's delivered nothing. And when I realized pretty early on, because people talk to me, I won't mention their names, but you have patriots in Haiti. You have real patriots, many of them, and many young ones, which is why I'm really confident about Haiti's future. But they all told me, look, we can't just go to elections for a number of reasons. We can't just go with another beat up power sharing agreement. We need to kind of do what we did after the Duvaliers and do that socio-political reset. And Haitians have a reason to not trust democracy. They don't trust democracy. They don't trust dictatorship. They don't trust anything, and they don't have any reason to trust anything. They really have never been given a shot at democracy other than that 1990 or 91 election that Aristide won. They've all been kind of like rigged or didn't look good, and they weren't led by the Haitians the way they needed to be. So I saw everyone explained to me that without good elections, we're wasting our time. And if it takes 6 months or 2 years, okay, but we got to create the conditions to get to elections. And I started seeing the embassy not caring about that and just going towards Henri, I think because of convenience. I think because he's more compliant, he did accept to take an unlimited number of deportees, apparently, because I saw there was another, 800 or something today. So when I saw, and then I came back to the department, I started having the conversation with people, and it became crystal clear that we were backing Henri for good, bad, or whatever. And I was like, guys, if you want to fix this, this is not the solution. And I still don't think it is. I'm not sure that consensus is the solution. It didn't work over the long term last time, but I really believe it's the only chance out of this mess. And I do believe that it has a good chance of working and to create a new generation of real Haitian leaders that care about the people, that don't care about enriching themselves or that their brother-in-law gets to, take all the bribes at the port and this guy gets to control the gun. No. It needs to start, and one of the goals of the government needs to be transparent and control that impunity. We're not going to get rid of it. But it's certainly the Montana's transition government, a major goal is transparency and accountability. And so I came to the point, I saw those terrible images. I went back and talked to the department, and it was clear that they were not going to change their backing for Henri. And I just thought, I can't be part of this from the inside. And that's when I resigned. Although I haven't shut up since then. Hopefully I'll shut up.
Let me ask you this question, Ambassador, if you don't mind, McElvey. What was your charge from the president when they appointed you special envoy, a charge d'affaires, whatever it was? What did the administration want you to do in Haiti? And I remember also when you resigned, they kind of threw you under the bus. They said that you were trying to have the U.S. invade Haiti. Well, can you elaborate on these 2 points for us? First of all, what was your charge, and what did you recommend to the administration vis-a-vis Haiti?
So yeah, I can try to explain that. When I was given the job or asked about the job in a really weird way. I wasn't really asked. The Secretary of State or the President didn't call out to me. A colleague kind of did. And I was explained that the role was to go down and figure out, you know the Haitians, you've lived there, security is what they told me. Go down and kind of figure out what the right way forward is for the US for peace, political stability, et cetera. So I went down thinking that that's what I was supposed to do. I've changed my theory, and after, when I quit, and in that period, it became quite evident to me, I was not nominated or assigned for that reason. I was named special envoy as a fig leaf to please the diaspora and get them off the administration's back. That's the reason I was named special envoy for Haiti, I believe. And then,
What's that? Go ahead.
so what did I recommend? I recommended let these folks come together, Haitian solution. We can play mediator, you know, the United States. We can play around the side. We can push people together. We can hug them. We can kick them. But we need to let them come to their own solution. And whatever it is, you know, they came to me with all kind of five-headed presidents. I was like, oh my God, it's Haiti's solution. So I'm fine with that. And when I realized that either A, we're terrified of letting the people move forward with a model that has worked with, at least in the short term in Haiti. But they're with Henri, they've been with Henri. I've talked to the Secretary of State, I've talked to people at levels, high levels across the US government. And while most of them seem to sort of understand, at the end of the day, they can't just swallow the piece that Ariel Henry is not trusted. First of all, he doesn't trust the Haitian people, which a leader, if he doesn't trust his people, then they're never going to trust him. They don't trust him, and they're never going to trust him because he had 7 months to earn their trust. And as you know, you only get one chance to make a first impression, right?
I'm glad you brought up the diaspora in a couple times. But before I get into that, tell me then, you know, Secretary Nichols has said so many times that the State Department does support a Haitian-led solution, right? Has he articulated to you what that Haitian-led solution could look like?
I think he's articulated it publicly 7 times or several times, including in testimony last week in front of our Congress. He believes, he wants a Haitian-led solution, but it must include Ariel Henry. So rather than asking for a consensus solution, they're asking for a unanimous solution, which is flawed by definition. And the last time I worked in my diplomatic career on a similar situation where we forced a country to accept a unanimity government was Afghanistan in 2014. Yes. So that didn't work out very well. So I just think that's the wrong way to go. And if I thought there was any appetite on the part of the Haitians to have him as part of the process, I would not be all over the guy. But he's an assassination suspect, and the people don't see him as legitimate. And I just don't see how Haiti moves forward with him as part of the equation.
Not with him as part of the equation, but going back to, you know, the Montana solution or consensus, right? Ideally, how does that play out is the question, or how can that even come to be given where we are right now?
So
down.
The Montana, and obviously the people within the accord and the people that know the details far better than me, but it's a broad-based consensus accord, in my opinion, right now. It includes Penn and the 10 senators whose terms expired today, and it includes a ton of other former politicians. And I told everybody, you cannot move forward in Haiti without any politicians because you're just going to get a new round of politicians. I think you need everybody together. And then I believe the international community can use some of their law enforcement tools to keep an eye on people over the next couple of years. And those that are in this transition government, if they're found to be interacting with gang members or drug dealers or stuff like that, then there's consequences. It just doesn't. So Montana has chosen, as you know, interim president and prime minister. Okay. And they've been selling it to the country and talking to all the members, and they're going to come together and choose a cabinet here if they haven't already. And our ready to come in and start work and move forward. They include basically everybody who's served in the government in Haiti and the representatives across society over my lifetime, except for Tech Calais and PHTK and its babies. It's 150 babies that it's got running around out there.
So here's the question then, right? If the Montana Accords include so many people who have been around for so long, right? How do we really, like, what's the benefit of having those people who've had some experience in past Haitian governments before, right? How do folks really trust that they will act differently this time around as a provisional government instead of returning to the same old habits that we're seeing play out now?
And that's a great question. And
people think it's fishy, you know, to just
right.
the word
So
yeah.
What do you think would happen if we got everybody in Haiti together, except for, let's say, I don't know, 5 or 10 politicians who people think are dirty, but they have pretty powerful constituencies, right? So they got people, they can turn people out in the streets, they can get people to vote for them in their areas. And if they're not part of this, what are they going to be doing the next 2 years? They're going to spend all their time trying to sabotage this. Is exactly what they're going to be doing. And that's why I say unity. And while Gary didn't agree, I can't think of one good political role model in Haiti. I'm not an expert. And it's not about the role models. It's about the fact, and look, we don't have any good ones in the United States here right now. It's not Haiti or the United States. It's the fact that you have not had a leader that has focused on the needs of the people. And this interim government, that's its whole job. It's a caretaker. It's not there to get power, and it's there to return the voice to the people is what the whole purpose of it is. And you cannot monitor the politicians if they're not part of it. So if you have an accord and you just get rid of all the politicians, they're just going to be running around doing the same stuff they've always done. So if they're part of it, you can monitor. And I know a couple of Haitian politicians well, and there's not a Haitian politician that does not have bad reports, or he did that, or he was drug. Every one of them has a report at that embassy. I can promise you that. Hang on, the folks that were involved in the Montana, the politicians that have signed up for the Montana right now have been 100% honest to me over the last 7 months. And when I was in Haiti 10, 11 years ago, these 5 guys, let's say, never burned me once. So it starts with trust a little bit. I mean, that the politicians need to trust the people to select the leaders, and then they need to earn the trust of the people. And I think that can happen, but this is like Haiti's one chance to get it right, I think.
Oh gosh, I've heard that so many times before. The one chance to get it right. No, it's a little
but
bit.
It is. The stars have sort of aligned. It's not, we're not done. And frankly, the moment a consensus government is recognized and takes over, that's when the hard work starts. I mean, that certainly is not the magic pill. That just gets us to the point where we can start the hard work. But I've said security is by far the biggest problem in Haiti, but we can't take on security until you have a political agreement, because there's no one with whom to work.
Right. Oh. So here we are then in the diaspora, you know, Gary being the poster child here. The diaspora, there's so much that's really relying on us right here to like make happen in Haiti. We're not only the de facto middle class, you know, of Haiti right now. We're now being looked at to actually push for political solutions or US Haiti policy out of Washington, DC, by way of our representatives that we've elected who happen to be Haitian American who are friends of Haiti, right? Let's talk a little bit about that. You've talked about in your column, Gary, a couple times. What role does the diaspora play now at this new, time for Haiti, this last chance for Haiti?
I'm going to answer that, and then after that, I have a burning question for Ambassador Foote.
You want to ask him first?
Sure.
Okay, ask him first. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, Malcolm mentioned my column today. It was based partly on a conversation I had with a physician in Brooklyn. He's a doctor. He runs a clinic, fairly successful. And he was telling me about how in his mind, the US has it in for Haiti. It has, somehow it doesn't want Haiti to move forward. It has time and time again supported the wrong people. And, we said earlier that there were no continuity and Haitian democracy, and a couple of the panelists have pointed to Preval, which were, and I wanted to bring that up because it was two things happened in both Preval's government. Haiti had foreign intervention, and then therefore there couldn't be any street protest because first it was the US, the first one. The second one, it was the UN. So the wolves stayed behind. But anyway, what can you say about that? Is there a US government conspiracy to keep Haiti down? I really want you to weigh in on this question.
Okay. I'm certain there was. Okay. So back in independence and in the 1800s, definitely the US did not want Haiti to rise up and become powerful because the white guys up here didn't want their slaves getting on the ideas from the Haitians, right? And that even Reconstruction, we've had a messy integration that's still ongoing here in the United States. Today, and then I guess I can understand here and there, we've done this for political expediency, that, but every time we cannot choose a leader of Haiti for US political expediency, particularly when it fails miserably. So this time around, I'm scratching my head and I'm thinking, how could it possibly be in the United States interest to not back a civil society, opposition, political, young, old, poor, rich people consensus and stick with a guy who might have been an accomplice in killing the president? How can they do that? It boggles my mind. And I've always, in my years working on Haiti, sort of laughed and chuckled at the Haitian conspiracy theories on a lot of stuff, as you guys do as well. I'm starting to scratch my head and think this just does not make sense. Why so stubborn? Why so dug in on this guy? But I think that Haiti is truly clamoring for its sovereignty right now. And I think this is a moment where I'm not sure Haiti wants the United States to do. I know Haiti doesn't want the United States to make this decision, and I don't think the United States is going to be able to make it in the long term. It may take some patience here, but I'm not talking months and months like we've been through. I expect you'll see more information on the current de facto government of Haiti and bad stuff it's been up to in the coming days and weeks. And people are just going to realize we're riding a lame horse here.
I have a couple of follow-ups to that one. I think we'll use that to wrap up. But let me go back to you, Gary, on the diaspora piece.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the diaspora has an incredible role to play. The question is, are we ready? And the answer is no. We talk about all this $2 billion that we send every year to Haiti, but that's really a wasted money. It's all for consumption. It doesn't stay in Haiti because Haiti doesn't produce anything. We import everything, and so therefore the money comes right back to the United States. And so we have to find a better way to engage with Haiti. And the way we can do that, first of all, I think we have to come together. All of us have a role to play. We have to join organizations, create those that don't exist. And we have to organize politically. Because if you think about it, Chuck Schumer, the Haitian vote can make or break Chuck Schumer. In Florida, it's even closer. And Yvette Clarke and Flatbush, and just let's go Haitian enclave to Haitian enclave, exert some real pressure, because decisions about Haiti are made in Washington, as the ambassador knows very well. And just now, the State Department, because this is such a extremely difficult position, is looking towards the diaspora to weigh in. But I'm not sure it's a real genuine outreach. I think it's because they've run out of ideas, as Ambassador Foote has said, because they made the same mistake over and over, and that gives it the air of a certain conspiracy. So what I'm urging my fellow Haitian Americans to do is basically organize and understand, what Haiti needs, which is stability. I mean, here we are, February, in normal times, I would have my ticket ready to go down to Port-au-Prince for Carnival. And there were so many people coming down that Haiti's economy could not even absorb that, even despite as bad as the country had been the last several years. So basically, we need to find a way that we can invest in Haiti, not just to send money to a family and friends, because that's just survival. It's what I call welfare dependency. And we walked into a sort of corruption method that we've created with this remittance thing, because it's just not getting us anywhere. People in Haiti, they don't have to work because they have a monthly salary coming from the diaspora. That's not how you develop a country. And I think we need to really step back and look at our role. What is it that Haiti needs and what is that we need? And so we need to make alliances with the actors in Haiti. And I know that outside of these, political players on the scene, there are people who are not on the scene, but they are really trusted. They don't have a dossier at the embassy. They don't have any they have Haiti's good interests at heart, because they stayed. They could have left. They stayed because they really deeply, passionately care about Haiti, and they're looking for allies. And we should seek these people out, not the PHTK and these other dinosaurs that have no new ideas for Haiti, but like-minded people on the ground in Haiti to help us, to guide us as to what the country needs and how we can provide them. But we got a lot of work ahead of us before we can be a major player, the same way that Jewish Americans are, the Irish Americans and Italian Americans, and you see what's happening. Not to deviate a little bit from this conversation, but Ukrainian Americans are playing a very major role in what's happening now with Russia and Ukraine, and pushing the Biden administration. And so that's where we should be thinking about. And it's not, the U.S. government cannot stop that from happening. We are American citizens. They have limits on what they can do. And as young professionals or otherwise, anyone, it's not just the professionals that need to be involved, everyone. And so, if we're organized, we can make a difference, because Haiti needs it. We need it, because a lot of us would love nothing more than to go back and retire and contribute some way. But the way it is now, we can't do that.
I think someone in the chat makes a good point about the Haiti caucus, right? The House caucus that we see. There are individual friends, Levin, folks like that. You mentioned Yvette Clarke, who are friends of Haiti, right? So how do we truly mobilize them? So that's part of the question I have before we start moving into Q&A for my panel is, let me hear from Ambassador Foote about how to actually mobilize the politicians here in the US. Okay. I hear you, Gary. The diaspora can do what it needs to do, vote, register to vote, citizenship, get active, and be engaged, right? But then Ambassador Foote, tell us what can be done in the meantime, because Gary's plan is a long-term plan.
No, it sure is.
Yeah.
Um,
What do we do in the meantime then?
so in the meantime, uh, in our Congress, you have the Andy Levins and Yvette Clarke, Maxine Waters, Ayanna Presley. I'm missing a few other great ones. But there's a group of probably about 30, 40 that really feel strongly about Haiti and are good friends of Haiti and always will be able to get your issues up there when it's the right time. But right now, there's just so much going on in the world. Every place is just blowing up. So they're trying to fix a budget because in 11 days the budget runs out. We got war breaking out in Ukraine and all this stuff. So continued engagement with them is good, but you got to understand they only have so much bandwidth. And I have traded some texts with them, but I haven't even been able to talk to a few of them for a couple of weeks because they're so busy. And on the diaspora, Gary hit on a couple things that I think are important. First of all, diaspora is critical to Haiti's improvement, but let me warn you that you can be as bad as the US government if you go in and try to impose your ideas. Go in and support them with their ideas, because otherwise it gets really distracting. The biggest problem with the diaspora is there's so many disjointed groups. There's at least 300 Haitian diaspora groups, many of which I've talked to. And so you have to find like a super group or something of a limited number of people that can help Haiti. What they need from you, in addition to the remissions, people starve in the short term, but we do need to change the economy. But they need your cultural coaching, your success here where you gotta stop at a red light and you can't bribe the police officer when he wants to, and the culture where Haitians have been so successful in the US and France and Canada. I mean, it's incredible. If you look at Haitians, there's not a lot of Haitian garbage men running around. There's a lot of lawyers and doctors and presidents of universities and stuff. So this is the rule of law. The American culture in governing is where they are really going to need help. It's not that they don't want to do it. They just don't know how. They've never had anybody let them do it that way.
Mm-hmm. Cultural coaching. I'm going to remember that one. I think it's a pretty good one. We're almost at time, and there are so many questions in this Q&A. I just want to get to a few of them. A couple people mentioned the core group, right? Meaning the group of international community, just diplomats from places like the US, Canada, and different. So when we talk about Haiti, we've spent a lot of time talking about US policy, obviously because of your former role. But can you touch a little bit on the core group, just this, this conglomeration of, Canada, France, and these other groups that are also exerting pressure on Henri? What do we do with them?
So the core group, I think, was founded originally because they're all donors. They're all the major donors of Haiti with foreign assistance money. That doesn't necessarily buy them any greater rights than anybody else, but over time, they've become sort of like pro-consuls in Haiti. And when I was there 10 years ago after the earthquake, we get together once a month, once every 2 weeks. It was always painful for me because we just sit around gnashing our teeth about the problems. What are we going to do? Oh my God. And then they turn to the Americans. What are you going to do? And we'd say whatever Hillary Clinton or whatever had told us. And then everyone would line up behind the United States. This time around, I don't think the core group really knows what to do, which is why you've seen Canada go out and try some stuff in the US. If they just sit down and listen to the people in Haiti, they'd know what to do. Their problem is they don't get out in Haiti, because I got out and I talked to everybody and I saw Marty Sant and stuff, but I had like 9 guys with assault rifles with me everywhere I went. So it's hard to get out in Haiti to see this stuff and talk to these people. But if the core group needs to understand that its donor side is going to be important, but it needs to be done in a different way this time. And its interventions have been disastrous. And so absolve yourself of responsibility. Let the Haitians decide, and then we just back this instead of like, Henri's going to bring us elections in 6 months and just shut up and live with it. That's not going to work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, that's a pretty straightforward answer. Just kind of dissolve and stick to maybe just the donor realm instead of the politics piece, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So here are some other questions that I think would be, I guess, valuable for everyone to understand, right? What, say the core group goes away or dissolves or whatnot, we have the diaspora in the US, in Canada, and in France, right? The issue is between then and like right now, how do regular Haitians live? Because there's going to be apparently some sort of election, right?
At some point, one would
Yeah.
hope. I mean, I guess it's possible that we'll never have an election, but I think there's going to be an election at some point, yes.
Right. So then if ILRU organizes it, then people say it's illegitimate, they won't accept it, you know, and then we're back to
Quagmire.
the same thing, right? Another February 7th where people are saying you need to step down, it's my turn to step up, right? How do people actually live through this climate when there are no institutions, you know?
That's a fantastic question, and I'm the wrong guy to ask because I'm here in a nice house in the United States, and I don't have to live through it. So it's easy for me to offer my opinion. Because of the Haitians are tired, they're desperate, they're running out of hope, and if Henri stays, and I don't think he's going to step down today. He might not step down tomorrow, but I think with a little patience, external information and other things are going to help move this along. As long as he's there, it's just going to be a quagmire. It's just going to continue to slowly erode. No matter what he says, the gangs are totally chill with him in there because he's not doing anything against them. They're making their money. They're doing their business. And Henri can just stay in there. It'll just keep getting worse until such point as it gets so bad that the internationals have to go in there again. And nobody wants to see.
I mean, yeah, the main thing people are looking for is security, right? You don't want to.
Right. And so the other thing I see,
right.
And like I said, this is not an easy ABC thing. It's going to be a hard process. But when this consensus government is installed, because I'm kind of that optimistic that Haiti is going to recover her sovereignty and do that. So when they're installed, I would expect them to make some security announcements about some real actions over not maybe immediately, but over the course of the first 30 days, that they're going to do A or B or C. And that won't fix security overnight, but it'll be something. Ariel has done nothing. And the Haitian people won't trust him after that, but maybe down the road in a year, they'll trust him if they get security and stuff. So I can't, I mean, the Haitian people, you guys are going to fix this. It's moving in the direction where it will get fixed, and hang in there for a little while longer.
Yeah.
But nobody can expect them to hang in for a year. Absolutely not. That's crazy. And especially if I thought there was a shred of hope that on re-elections would be accepted and might lead to some political stability and an ability to do community-led development and get back to Haiti's kind of subsistence agriculture thing that everybody's tried to get it away from for 200 years. I think that can be done, but
we'll see. Barry, you wanted to jump in here?
Yeah, there's a question by Michael Matza, who's a colleague and a friend, former Philadelphia Inquirer, foreign correspondent. And the question is, Mr. Ambassador, in your resignation letter, you wrote that your recommendation were ignored and edited to project a narrative different from my own, quote. Can you give us example of that editing?
Yes, I can. So normally embassies report to Washington, and then the offices here in Washington, we report to the secretary separately. So I'm getting a view from Haiti and I'm getting a view from Washington. So I went down there and I came back, and for some weird reason, Ambassador Sisson was able to clear any paper going from the Haiti office up here to my bosses. So I sent a memo basically saying this consensus thing is really the only way forward that I see as being viable and delivering acceptable elections. And I was forced, this was a memo from Dan Foote to Secretary Blinken. I was forced to send that to to Port-au-Prince, where Ambassador Sisson injected all this good stuff about Ariel Henry and toned down all the other stuff. So when it came back, I was like, I'm not sending that up. You gotta be kidding me. This is not from me. So that's a pretty good example. And the US was, I think, misled a little bit over the past few years, because I don't think the embassy was able to report the full scope of the situation in Haiti. So I don't think the people in Washington to this day have as good a understanding as they really should of what's going on.
Well, I think that was a pretty good example.
Yeah, I mean, literally, it's like my memo says, Henri's bad. He might have killed the president. He's mixed up in stuff. He's not done anything. And then you have this other historical opportunity, and the memo comes back and it basically flips it over and says, you should go with Ariel Henry. Come on.
So here's a follow-up question from someone else in the Q&A about the killing of Jovenel Moise, right? It's from an attendee named Henri Alexandre. What is the likelihood, in your opinion, that the investigation will reveal the real culprits? Or will it be a sham of an investigation with the US deciding who to blame ultimately? That's the question.
I think one of the good things usually when our FBI gets involved into international cases, I can't recall many cases when the evidence leads something in the right direction where politics have really done, at least in my 20, 25 years. I know in the past that probably happened more. I'm fairly confident that with Rudolph Jarre and Palacios and all these other yo-yos coming up here to the States, that they're singing already, and we're gonna figure things out. And there's also a couple of major international media houses that have been doing a lot of investigative stuff, and I expect you're gonna see more news from them. But I think you're gonna get, it could take time. So when we learned it was an FBI case, my Haitian friends were like, oh, thank God, they're gonna get rid of Henri. I was like, it's gonna take a year. Right. So at least if they're starting now to get to the point where they have an indictable case on anybody. But I'm really concerned that this is going to involve people that Haitians don't want to see involved in the assassination of their president. But the truth will come out in the end. But it's looking like it's pretty ugly to me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So here's another question from the group. You know, this is from Michelle Carchon. It's a pretty frank question, Ambassador Foote. In retrospect, looking back, right, do you think you were duped when the US asked you to take on this envoy role last year?
Yeah, a little bit, sure. That's similar to when I got all mad because they were deporting people, and I went into the number 3 person of the State Department, and I was like beside myself. I was like, you guys didn't have the courtesy to tell me. I mean, my job is like peace and stability, and you didn't tell me. And she was like, what makes you think you're important enough that we would tell you? So I was obviously duped by a lot of people, and not as smart as I thought or important as I thought I was. But at the end of the day, if Haiti gets a chance out of this for the people, civil society, opposition people to hit reset, they just want to move away from the terrible erosion and deterioration of the last 12 years. And the only way I think they feel they can do that is without the party that put that upon them, without PHTK. That doesn't mean that they can't run in the elections, that they can't come back and be politically active in the future. It's not like, but I think Haitians want somebody to be accountable for the situation.
Well, that makes complete sense. Some of these people that we're hearing the names of, the Bijou Matelis is one that I see Jean Saint-Ville, typed in here in the Q&A. Did you have an opportunity to meet with those folks, Ambassador? And what was your impression of them then?
Which folks are you talking about?
So the Bijou, Michel Martelly, obviously the former president.
Yeah, I know Michel Martelly quite well. I know Laurent Lamotte and Gary Conille and all the guys from back then, because those were the guys I was working with every day.
Right.
But I haven't talked to him since 2012. And the more I look at things, the less I want to talk to him, to tell you the truth.
Well, that was the thing, because they've been laying fairly low, I would say relatively low, since the investigation, since all these names started coming out in the who's who in the assassination. We've seen Martelly like go to Lekai and just throw out money to people in the wake of the earthquake in August. But really, when these accusations come up that involve his brother-in-law, his name, all these friends and family members of his, we don't hear anything, right?
The truth hurts sometimes, doesn't it?
Yeah. So I think we can leave it at that for now. Really, to wrap it up, we've said a lot today, and I'm really curious about the social political reset, that you mentioned sort of at the beginning of this piece. There's so much that we've talked about now and so many different names that we threw out. But can you walk us through, for everyone who's on, what that social political reset could look like in your final remarks here?
As best as I can. So when I went there in July, everybody in civil society said, we can't have any politicians running Haiti. They ruined the place. All the politicians were like, you can't have any civil society people. They don't know how to run a government. The religious were like, nobody wanted anybody. Nobody trusts anybody. And for excellent reasons, right? Historical reasons. By coming to, and then over time, by talking to them, the second time I came back, the first time they were like really apart, the second time I came back, and they were all telling me the same thing all of a sudden. We can't have elections now. We'd like to reform the Constitution, probably. It's going to take a while. Security is critical. And I was like, oh my God, how did they go from like hating each other to thinking they want the same thing for Haiti? Well, they do want the same things for Haiti, and they've realized that. And then the fact, and we talked about this before, if this process shouldn't really be judge and jury, right? It's to set up an interim government, to hit reset, boom, failed state, hit reset, set up an interim government that people kind of trust, or that people don't distrust automatically. It's given us no reason to distrust them yet, and then see what happens. As I mentioned before, it's much easier when you have unity and everybody together to hold them together and to keep each other accountable and keep an eye on each other. That's not to say people are going to cheat, people are going to get out there and do bad things, certainly. But we have an opportunity to keep an eye on them this time. And then they come in, they don't have the full authority of the president to do whatever the hell he wants with money and stuff like this. There's it has training wheels on it, literally. It's a government with training wheels on it to get to election. So that's the reset. The reset is this consensus. And the reset is this consensus strong enough? And I really think it's pretty damn close, to tell you the truth, to survive without daily marriage counseling because I've tried that in Haiti before, and ain't nobody want to be the political marriage counselor in Haiti. But I watched a bunch of people who hated each other 7 months ago come together from different perspectives, former senators, people that never did politics before, voodoo guys, and they all want the same, which is why I think there's a chance. This is the reason, at least from a bad historian's perspective, the reason Haiti has never had a chance, in my opinion, is because no one's given the people the chance to go ahead and do this. You know what? If you mess it up, great, fine. If the Haitians mess it up, the point is in the trying. We know the internationals are going to mess it up. We know that Ariel Henry just is not going to work. So it's time for Haiti to be in control of its own destiny. And I think it's going to work. Maybe I'm crazy, probably.
Wow. I mean, there are so many things there to unpack. You know, one is the fact that you're saying everyone is trying to come together now, people who hadn't talked with each other before, because really there's no one left. Everybody else has had a turn. International communities, former politicians like Henri, these PHTK types, and now it's really up. So I guess your main point is to just leave Haiti alone. Is that right?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, to leave Haiti to the Haitians for a short period of time. Again, I do not think, if this is going on down the road a few months, we're in quagmire. I don't know that we're ever getting out of it. It just, inertia makes it tough to bounce out. But they have this consensus. Everyone has asked Henri to stand down. I think it's right to be patient. We don't want to see anything messy by any means down there. And nobody in Haiti, nobody in the diaspora, it's not good for Haiti. Nobody wants that to happen. So I think some patience in the short term. And I'm telling you, I'm confident that more external information is going to come to the party here pretty soon and make it easier for international actors to make decisions, probably. We'll see. I would have thought that they would have already had it easy enough to make a decision, because basically the consensus, Montana Penn, all this, they're handing the United States government exactly what we wanted. But for some reason, it's not what we want anymore. So I guess I didn't want the pie a la mode. I'm gonna have the lemon cream pie. Sorry, I ordered the wrong thing. But the U.S., I don't know why they don't want exactly what they were looking for 7 months ago. Now we'll see.
Yeah, it's really mind-boggling. Gary, do you want to weigh in there with any of you know, what, either add on to what the ambassador said or present your own in terms of what can or should happen now, where we are tonight? Like, what ideally, what should be next from your perspective?
I mean, there are no good solutions right now because we've crossed the Rubicon. I think we had the opportunity several months ago to really, selected the right prime minister. I think, now
until the core group messed it up, right?
Yeah, and this is probably not a very popular opinion, but I think right now we box ourselves into going along with Ariel Henry because the State Department is all in. I mean, if you listen to Undersecretary Nichols, he's very clear on that. So now, how do we maneuver this position? It's that now, how do we get to the right elections? Because we kind of brush it aside a little bit, but the real power broker right now in Haiti are the gangs who have artfully cut off Port-au-Prince from the rest of the country. And so we need to do two things: either bring them a seat to the table and discuss and negotiate with them, or go in and eradicate them. And so where do we have the stomach to eradicate them? I don't think so. I think the Haitian people do, but I don't think the core groups do. I mean, because what it would take sometimes might violate, human rights norms. And so, we're not, this is a war zone, I mean, let's call it for what it is. And so we are acting as if this is like yet another political crisis in Haiti. Yes and no, because in the past, we never had the gangs playing such a pivotal role, such a commending role.
Well, you did, but you just had to have the U.S. or MNUSTA come in the 2 times that it got to that point, right? And you don't want this time. I have built police forces in a number of countries, including Haiti, although it was a lot better when I left than it is now. But the PNH is not terrible. You can create solid security forces with money, time, equipment, and the right trainers. That's all you need, okay? And the Haitian, the consensus group is prepared to use Haitian funds and to move in that direction immediately. It's going to take time. The gangs, remember, these are not armies. They're a bunch of punks out there. They start seeing guys with laser sights and knee pads on and night vision goggles, and they're going to drop their guns and run away and pee their pants. So the gangs are critical, but you can't take on the gangs with Ariel Henry because he would have already done it. And that's, I contend that we got to take on the gangs. Oh, we can't do it for Ariel Henry. We got to have elections. Oh, the people won't trust it because of Ariel Henry. So it just keeps coming back to this one thing that Haitians have come together in history several times, usually against something as opposed to for something. And you're completely united against PHTK and Ariel Henry right now. But the internationals are forcing them in there. And I just think you got to say, no, sorry.
Well, Ambassador Foote, let me push back on that a little bit, because I think we've always seen, in Haiti, various crossroads, we always have to have a person, a boogeyman it seems
you got one right now. Right?
Well, but then
it's Henry.
We've never solved the problem because we're focusing on this one person. Can we overcome Ariel Henry? Is Ariel Henry the source of all that ails Haiti right now?
Yes. Could George Washington and these guys beat the British? Yeah. Could you guys, the Haitian, the Marrons, and the slaves beat Napoleon Bonaparte's army? Yeah. Can you guys do it now? Absolutely. But it's going to take unity and trust. And those are the 2 things that are difficult for Haitians to understand. Not that they can't get the concepts, but they've just never experienced it before, right? So unity and trust needs to occur within this interim government first, mainly to keep everybody honest and move towards the elections. And then they need to give the people reasons to trust them. Because if they don't, the people won't trust the elections and we're wasting our time. And, you might as well have a dictator. If we can't have elections that we can trust, maybe the Haitians are right. I think democracy is what Haitian people want. And I think it can be delivered. And I think it's time to just say, no, we don't want Henri. And so what can you do right now? Write your congressman, go on Twitter, tell Henri to step down. If everybody in the world tells him to step down, he's going to step down. And he does not, it's not like he has a big following in Haiti. He's got a bunch of fat middle-aged guys like him, like 12 of them, and they're all going to get mad when they see and grab their guns and realize it's 12 guys against the world. So
okay, so it sounds like ideally Ariel Henry, and correct me if I'm misunderstanding this, but ideally Ariel Henry steps down, the Montana.
That's what's right for Haiti, yes.
And then ideally, from what I'm hearing here today, the president and prime minister that the Montana Accord.
Transitional, provisional.
Right, provisional. They step in and then after a few months, give them some time to figure out the gangs. Would that be the priority? It sounds
Yeah, I
like.
mean, there are several priorities, but that's a key priority.
Right,
You
right.
we can't go to Carnival. I can't go to the beach. Nobody can, your aunt can't
Yeah,
go. That's critical.
it's crazy.
Um,
Okay.
and I believe it's going to take time, but if the provisional government comes in and does the right thing, which will probably take a training contract with a private sector firm to come in and do an elite unit, the HMP, that will get you moving in the right direction. They also need to look at COVID and health and what's going on there. They need to look at food security, which has really suffered a lot in Haiti. Fuel, get all that, but they can't look at 40 things. They need to look at 5 things probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just wanted to add all those people left homeless by the massacres in all these different neighborhoods.
Absolutely. You got 30,000 refugees from the gangs alone in Port-au-Prince. More, I'm sure, now with the deportees back there.
Okay. So just to recap for everyone, what we heard today from Ambassador Foote was, Ariel Henry must step down. That's what he's been saying on Twitter, as you all know. Same message. Have the provisional government come in, give them some time to figure it out and prioritize the security, the gangs, get rid of the gangs, right? Help retrain PNH so that they can actually help people not feel so anxious and be able to live a life where they're not so scared of being kidnapped or worse these days. And then from there, Gary, was I to understand that the diaspora and folks outside of the US should be lobbying their US representatives to make sure there's a better policy towards Haiti for the long term? Okay, I just wanted to make sure I recap for everyone who might have come in late.
And then there's one more step, and this is a critical step. So the new government needs a plan, and everybody needs to hold them accountable to a plan. They just can't come in like Ariel Henry and say, we're going to take pictures and cut ribbons on a bridge and go out to happy hour. No, they need a plan, and we need to hold them to that plan, and they need to get with the international community with a little plan Haiti. Okay, what does Haiti need in the next 2 years to get beyond it? And the international community will bring the resources, but Haiti's got to throw elbows and do it the right way in Haiti style, not in international style as well.
What does Haiti style mean?
Pardon?
Like, what do you mean by Haiti style in that sense? Like it's
the development dynamic in Haiti we always try to do macro development, which kind of harkens back to plantation days, right? Where the society in Haiti is sort of small, private farmers, right? Everybody has their pigs and their plots and their stuff in the countryside, and it needs to be micro community-led development. Instead of white guys coming in and tell Haitians what they should do so they can have more food on their farm, Haitians need to tell the international community, what do they need? They need irrigation, because we've come in with every crazy idea, including killing all the pigs in Haiti in 1982, and it doesn't work. So it needs to be community-based micro development that creates jobs within it, as opposed to USAID puts $2 billion here and no Haitians ever see it.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a really great point. We'll be sure to follow up on is, the roadmap for Haiti from whoever really is in the palace tomorrow and in the weeks ahead. Like, what is your plan for the country? I don't think I've ever seen one from any Haitian politician, past or present, really. I've seen a lot of texts and a lot of speeches, but never like a an actual plan.
Right. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's what we're going to do. And they shouldn't overpromise. I mean, everybody realizes it's hard right now. So tell us 3 or 5 things that you can do and you can do good and do it and then do something else. And if they do that, people might be able to trust them, which is the key to this whole thing. Democracy requires trust. And if there's no trust there, you're going to have a dictator. So I hope that they can create the trust within the country.
Oof, this is heavy stuff. So with that said, I think we're gonna wrap it up, unless Gary, you wanted to add any closing remarks before we end for the night. It's been a lot.
Yeah, no, I wanted to thank Ambassador Foote for his candor. He's been really open and spoken his mind. I mean, I know he's retired, but having been around the State Department folks since back when I was in the Peace Corps, you don't often get that kind of
Candor.
yeah, from the heart, call it like it is. And I thank him for his views on Haiti and for sharing with our audience what he thinks some of the things that the US government and the diaspora, what we need to do. And I think it's really refreshing. He's absolutely right. We need to let Haiti fail itself, because to some extent, Haiti hasn't failed.
And I don't think it will. I think they're going to surprise us, Gary.
Well, yeah, I mean, give them the chance. And you know,
Well, you're talking about 2 different failures. You're saying,
well, yeah, exactly.
It's a failed state right now. However, it's a failed state or failing state because it hasn't had the chance to really rule itself and fail on its own.
So let's give the people on that part of the island the chance to fail. I don't think they will. I think they're going to succeed. They've never had the chance to fail, but they've failed repeatedly because the internationals have forced failure upon them. And this is one time where that doesn't have to happen.
Okay. Not since you mentioned that part of the island, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Dominican Republic, because we're seeing so much activity coming, you know, in and out of that side of the island, with Haitians trying to leave in droves to just set up there. The entire middle class, from what I hear, has just essentially moved for school, for work, for all of it. And at the same time, the Dominican Republic government obviously is getting frustrated and taking out a lot of that frustration on people who rely on trade with the DR, meaning the poorer Haitians who can't go buy condos and be on the beach and all of that. With that in mind, you know, I wanted to bring up this point, which is someone typed in kind of late about what the Haiti's closest neighbors in the Caribbean could or should do when we talk about the international community, right? Like, there are neighbors who are closer than the US or Canada and France for sure. Can I get your thoughts on just that piece?
Sure. Be Caribbean brothers and sisters, right? Support the Haitians. Don't tell them what to do. The Caribbean is, you all share a lot of commonalities. I mean, there's a lot of differences too, but there's a lot of commonalities in the Caribbean. Let's be honest, there's limited resources, and all of the countries in the Caribbean have their own challenges, but I think just solidarity with the other countries in the Caribbean, as opposed to distraction, which is what I saw and try to avoid. You know, you have CARICOM coming in here. CARICOM might have a role to play, but not yet. Hang on, don't distract, okay? OAS, whoa, let's get it. So I think there's a role for the Caribbean to play. I think a big part of that role is to help Haiti protect its sovereignty. That's what this kind of comes down to at the end of the day. The rest of the Caribbean could certainly align, and CARICOM votes as a bloc, which is, I don't know, Gary, how many countries, 19 or something like that. US gets 1 vote. So CARICOM has some juice in the game.
All right. Well, there's one more thought to just, one more feather to add to your hat this evening. Again, I would like to thank Ambassador Daniel Foote for joining us and being so incredibly upfront about his time in Haiti in the past year. and why we see him so active on Twitter. He's clearly really passionate about what happens with Haiti next.
I
And
can't wait to quit Twitter. Oh, I hate it. I'm going to quit the day this gets like a resolution. I'm off Twitter.
I can relate. Gary, thank you, of course, for making the Haitian Times available as a platform to even have these conversations that we have to try to get these thoughts and perspectives out there in a more accessible fashion, besides just reading them in the foreign press. So thank you both for your time. Thank you everyone for joining us. We will be following up with whoever happens to be in power in the weeks ahead. We're hoping, and we'll keep hounding them and calling them to get back to us to find out what their plan is for Haiti, how they're going to move forward, whoever they happen to be. So do keep following us at thehaitiantimes.com, on Twitter and Instagram, all of that, and continue to support the work. Thank you again for joining. I'm McElvey Neal. We'll see you next time.